The night my house went up in flames, I wasn't even inside. I had just tucked my kids into bed at my sister's place 2 blocks away when my phone buzzed with a frantic call from a neighbor. Your house, oh my God, your house is on fire. By the time I got there, the street was lined with flashing red lights, the air choking with smoke, and the home I had poured 10 years of blood, sweat, and love into was nothing but a raging inferno. And through the chaos, through the crackle of burning timber and the cries of firefighters fighting to contain it, I saw her, arms crossed, lips pursed, a faint smirk she tried to hide. Karen. Karen was the president of our homeowners association, and for years she had made it her personal mission to make my life miserable. It started small. Letters taped to my door about leaving my trash can out an hour too long, or the shade of paint I'd chosen for my shutters, which she claimed clashed with the neighborhood aesthetic. But then it grew into harassment. Threats of fines for my kids' bikes left in the yard, calling animal control on my old dog for excessive barking, even though he could barely stand up anymore. Karen thrived on power, and I, single dad, working long shifts as a public defender, didn't have the time or energy to fight back. But nothing prepared me for this. The fire marshal later confirmed what I already suspected: it wasn't an accident. Someone had soaked the side of my garage with accelerant. There were no signs of faulty wiring, no lightning storm, no kitchen mishap. My house hadn't just burned. It had been burned down. And while the investigation was underway, I knew in my bones who had done it. Karen had threatened me just 2 weeks earlier, standing on my porch, hissing through clenched teeth after I refused to pay a bogus HOA fine. People like you don't belong here. I'll make sure you regret ever moving into this neighborhood. Regret. My kids lost their bedrooms, their toys, their drawings taped to the fridge. Everything. Gone. But life has a strange way of twisting fate. The very next week, as I was still picking through the ashes of my life, I walked into a courtroom for a new case assigned to me. And there she was. Karen, dressed neatly in beige slacks and a pearl necklace, clutching her handbag like a lifeline. For a moment, I thought I was hallucinating. But no, she was real, and she was on the defense side. Charged with arson. My jaw tightened, my pulse pounding in my ears. The irony was almost unbearable. I was a public defender. My oath was to stand by anyone assigned to me, no matter what. But how could I defend her, the woman who had destroyed my home and shattered my children's sense of safety? I sat there frozen as the judge read out her name, her charges, and then, by some cruel twist of fate, announced me as her appointed attorney. Karen looked at me, recognition flashing in her eyes, and for the first time, she didn't smirk. She looked terrified. The days that followed tested every fiber of who I was. Friends told me to refuse the case. Let her rot, one said. My sister begged me to hand her off to another lawyer. But deep inside, a war raged. If I walked away, I'd be betraying my oath, the very principles that made me a lawyer. If I stayed, I'd have to fight for the very person who had burned my world to ashes. During our first meeting in the detention center, Karen didn't look powerful anymore. She looked small, pathetic, even. She stammered excuses. It wasn't me, they're lying, I didn't mean for anything bad to happen. I sat there, stone-faced, watching the woman who had tormented me unravel. And here's where things shifted. Because as much as I wanted vengeance, I realized something: this wasn't about Karen anymore. This was about me. About the example I set for my kids. About standing in court and proving that my integrity couldn't be scorched away like my house. So I did my job. I combed through evidence, questioned witnesses, filed motions. And though every part of me screamed for her to get the maximum sentence, I didn't sabotage her case. I fought for her rights just as I would for any other client. That didn't mean the truth stayed hidden. The prosecution had damning evidence, security footage, witness testimony, even receipts from the hardware store where she bought supplies. The jury took less than an hour to find her guilty. When the verdict was read, Karen broke down sobbing. Not out of remorse, but because the empire of control she had built was crumbling. She was sentenced to years behind bars, and as she was led away in handcuffs, her eyes darted to mine. For once, she didn't see a man beaten down by her cruelty. She saw someone she couldn't destroy. Walking out of that courtroom, I felt lighter than I had in months. Yes, my house was gone. Yes, my children and I would have to rebuild from nothing. But I had held on to something more important: my principles. My kids saw their father refuse to stoop to hatred, even when it would have been easier. They saw that strength isn't about revenge. It's about rising above, about proving that no one, not even the worst kind of person, can take away who you are. And as we began the slow process of rebuilding, brick by brick, I knew one thing for certain. Karen may have burned down my house, but she would never burn down my spirit.